Right about now, the President is finishing up his regular meeting with the Secretary of State. The Vice President, of course, is currently on a 10-day trip visiting South Korea, Japan, Indonesia, and Australia. While in South Korea, the Vice President participated in an Easter church service with both American and South Korean service members and their families, and has been holding bilateral meetings with representatives of the South Korean government. The Vice President is delivering a message to the people of the Republic of Korea on behalf of the President that even in these troubled times, the United States stands with them for a free and secure future. Under President Trump, our ironclad alliance will be even stronger. Our nations will be safer, and the Asia-Pacific region will be more secure. From South Korea, the Vice President will head to Japan. I'll continue to provide updates as they warrant during the Vice President's trip.
Does the President have a red line when it comes to North Korea, that if they cross it, they will bring about some kind of military response from the U.S.?
I think what we talked about, the use of red lines in the past with respect to Syria, the President's made that drawing red lines hasn't really worked in the past. He holds his cards close to the vest, and I think you're not going to see him telegraphing how he's going to respond to any military or other situation going forward. That's just something that he believes has not served us well in the past. We did this with Mosul. We start to talk about what the action will be months in advance, and it really gives the intended recipient of action a heads up as to what's going on. So I don't think that you're going to see the President drawing red lines in the sand, but I think that the action that he took in Syria shows that when appropriate, this President will take decisive action.
So let me just to follow up on that. Syria is one thing. North Korea is quite another when they have nuclear ambitions the way that they do.
Right.
When you talk about, well, we did this to Syria and we did this to Afghanistan, is that
no?
too,
I think in the case
too loose with a bombastic rhetoric?
No. I think, and again, I please don't read too much into that in terms of trying to make an analogy on the action. I think it's quite the opposite. But I think with respect to North Korea in particular, the President had a really good meeting with President Xi down at Mar-a-Lago, where I think he's spoken extensively about the relationship that they made down there, and that they continue to work to improve. And the results of that are paying off. I think you see China playing a much more active role with respect to North Korea, both politically and economically. That they can continue to apply pressure to achieve results, and I think we're going to continue to urge China to exhibit its influence in the region to get better results.
But North Korea did launch that missile.
I understand that, and it failed. We're well aware of what's going on. We monitored that situation. The President was kept up to date, as you know. But I think that we're going to continue to work with China in particular to help find a way forward on this. John.
The President, as you just mentioned, has spoken about this relationship that he's developed with President Xi, and how President Xi would be leaning on the North Korean government to prevent the kind of attempted missile launches like we saw over the weekend. It seems as if that effort, in terms of leaning on North Korea, did not work. In addition to that, the Vice Foreign Minister of North Korea said to the BBC today that North Korea will test its missiles on a weekly, a monthly, and a yearly basis. So my question is, what kind of pressure is China putting on North Korea?
Again, I think this goes back to the nut of what Jim was asking, which is I think for us to telegraph what we're going to do or what we're going to ask others to do would not be a smart strategy to lay it out on public. But I think that if you realize, for example, on the economic side of things, China is the #1 importer of North Korean coal. I think to see them curtail some of that has a real economic impact on the region. There's a lot of economic and political pressure points that I think China can utilize, and we've been very encouraged with the direction in which they're going.
It is essentially, just based upon what they tried to do over the weekend, thumbing its nose at even China because of what they attempted to do.
I understand the question. I think we're just not there yet. We've got a lot of tools left and a lot of conversations that are ongoing, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think we've had a very productive direction that we've seen China move in, and I think there's an agreement, I think, by everyone so far that a nuclear capable North Korea is not in anybody's best interest, and I think we're going to continue to work with the Chinese in particular on this case.
North Korea, is the president prepared to act alone, or does he feel that Congress should be somehow involved in the process if any decision that includes the use of force is made?
I think he's going to utilize the powers under the Article 2 of the Constitution. I think what you saw with respect to the action that he had with Syria, he made sure that members of Congress were notified of his action in a very, very short amount of time. We're going to continue to seek their input on the policy overall, and then make sure that they're notified. We'll do that. But I think the bigger consultation issue is what we do with the larger world community and have that dialogue, as I've mentioned earlier, to make sure that every country that can is putting the appropriate level of economic and political pressure on North Korea to act in a way that helps.
Political leaders in Hawaii are reviewing plans for emergency plans in case they are attacked. Does the president believe that the level of tension between the United States and North Korea is at the point where we should start reviewing emergency attack plans?
So just to be clear, and again, I'm not going to get into, I would just tell you that there are military contingency plans for almost every scenario in a numerous aspects around the world, here at home, everything from humanitarian relief to refugee crises to attacks. That is standard military procedure to have those kind of things. So to make that in any way, shape, or form sound new would be a mistake. It is a standard operating procedure of the military to plan for contingencies in a number of operations and a number of hotspots throughout the world on a regular basis. And with respect to Korea in particular, that's been going on for decades.
I'm just wondering, how high does the president view the threat level from North Korea?
Again, I think the president's made clear we're aware of the activities that they've engaged in, and we're monitoring them, and the national security team continues to keep them up to date.
Just one more on that topic. One of the reasons why successive administrations has chosen to negotiate with the leaders of North Korea is because it's believed that there are no good military options to deal with. Does this president believe that there are viable military options for dealing with North Korea?
Again, I'm not. I understand that, but I think taking anything on or off the table in itself limiting your options to some degree, and so I'm not going to even discuss that.
Vice President Pence says that regarding North Korea's strategic patience is over.
Right.
What does that mean exactly?
The era of strategic patience was a policy that the Obama administration enacted to basically wait and see. I think we have now understood that policy is not one that is prudent for the United States, and I think that's why you've seen stepped-up efforts, particularly with respect to China, and that's why I think the relationship that the president really is building on from the time that he spent down in Mar-a-Lago with President Xi is hopefully going to produce results. And so part of it is to actively engage with world partners like China in particular that have economic and political influence that they can utilize.
What would it take to restart some sort of talks with North Korea?
Well, let's see. Again, I'm not going to get ahead of the policies right now. I think we're seeing some active engagement with China, and that's helpful. So let's see how that goes. Allie.
Thank you, Sean. I have two for you on North Korea. You're doing it today. You've done it before. You've stood at the podium and said you don't want to telegraph moves that the president will make, but you want to preserve that element of surprise. A Kremlin spokesperson said today President Trump is more impulsive and unpredictable than Kim Jong-un. At what point does this strategy of unpredictability become a liability?
Well, I respectfully would disagree. I think that the rest of the world, when he acted in Syria in particular, the world community, not just the world community, but here at home, on a bipartisan basis, applauded the president's actions. Well, I think absolutely, but it's not. I think that you have to look at the flip. I mean, I talked about it a minute ago. When you look at some of the actions that we've taken in the past, Mosul being a good example, where we leaned in and started to explain what we're going to do and when we're going to do it, that takes a huge element off the table of not only surprise, but achieving the effect that you're trying to do. So the world community, and especially the more that he meets with world leaders, in developing relationships, repairing relationships, and reasserting the U.S. place around the globe, it should be a reassuring to not just us here at home, but around the globe, people are excited that the president is taking action, and decisively so.
You've made it clear that you're not taking options off the table,
right.
including military options. Defense officials have estimated for a long time that war on the Korean Peninsula will cost thousands of lives. It could economically devastate South Korea. Is this to be read then as an acceptance of that risk by the Trump administration?
No, it's again. I think the point is that if you get into a series of hypotheticals about what you will take on or off the table, will we do this or not that? At some point, you really start to narrow your options, and I think the president has long held a strategy that doing that begins to give the enemy, the opponent, whatever it is in any particular case, whoever he's, even if it's just a negotiation. The options of knowing where to go and where not to go. And so the president's been very clear that not taking options off the table gives us a stronger hand.
So do you accept the risk of war?
I didn't. No, because again, by what you're trying to do is to get us to take something off. I think at the end of the day, we will always act in America's best interest to ensure that our national interests are protected. And so if we were to say that we're taking something off the table in any way, shape, or form, that would limit what we have to do. We are going to make sure that we do what we have to protect our national interests. And obviously, with respect to South Korea, we've been very clear. The Vice President spoke very clearly about the need to strengthen and cement the alliance that we have with South Korea during his visit.
I don't mean to belabor the point, but I just want to be clear because I want to flip the coin, right, which is something you talked to us about. If you're not taking options off the table, if you flip it then, that can be read as you're accepting the fact that
I think that's a
stretch.
Right, that's a stretch. I think don't. That's the point. I'm not. No, it's not a question of taking the risk or not taking the risk. Again, you can start to go down a very dangerous path of, will you use this, will you not use that? The president's very clear, and I think that everybody who's been briefed on him, and I think when you look at the quality of the national security team that's surrounding him, by all accounts, probably the best in our nation's history in terms of all across the board, you know that the president is getting unbelievably sound and strategic advice on how to protect our national interests. Brian.
Last week you dismissed, I think it was when Hallie asked the question, you dismissed North Korea and said it isn't a threat if you can't go through with it. So what changed? What's our goal in North Korea? What's the strategy? And what's your response to the critics who say that this is just blue smoke and mirrors to hide some of the problems on the White House staff and some of the failing domestic social agenda?
I don't think there's anybody in the world who would not believe that North Korea's actions are both provocative and a concern. So the actions that we're taking are extremely they're appropriate and justified. What we're doing is working with the world community, and as I've mentioned multiple times today, especially China, which is really acting in a historic way to ensure that our national interests and the safety of the peninsula is protected.
So what about the follow-up there is what about the criticism from people on the Hill who say you're just hiding a domestic agenda that isn't working?
I've never heard that. I haven't heard that criticism. Okay, well, then we travel in different circles. But I don't think that there's anybody who honestly believes that after seeing the launches that they're taking and the work that they're undertaking, that any attempt to protect our country and our national interests is anything other than the right and justified thing to do. Francesca.
Thank you, Sean. This morning in an interview, you referred to the missile launch as an unsuccessful military attack. That contradicts what other White House officials have said.
It was an unsuccessful launch.
Okay, so you just misspoke in the Fox and Friends interview. There's no specific evidence that this was some sort of attack.
No, it was an unsuccessful missile launch.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Glenn.
Sean, you talked about the end of strategic patience, two questions, in the context of attempting to expand China's role in pressuring North Korea. Do you believe China has the power to change North Korea's behavior if they choose to do so? And then a follow-up.
That's a good question. I think they can definitely try. There's economic and political points that they could be pushing. Whether or not they achieve that outcome is yet to be seen. But I think that there's a lot of influence that they could exhibit in both of those areas, and we'll have to see. And that's, but it's clearly the prudent thing for the president to do to try to build that relationship with President Xi and see if we could achieve an outcome that's in all of our best interests. Jonathan.
Just a follow-up. How concerned are you that the uptick in the language, the bellicosity, tweets could potentially provoke unintentionally military action? I mean, is there a concern that a lot of the words that are being thrown around could have an unforeseen impact? Just explain to me, from the president's thinking, how concerned he is of the risk of an unintentional conflict.
I don't think that that's there. I think we're taking all the appropriate and prudent steps.
On North Korea, you said that China's playing an active role, you consider an historic role right now in pressuring the North Koreans. What are they doing?
Well, again, I think that when you look at both the economic front, coal in particular, that is North Korea's number one export. I think that they have taken some very helpful economic actions and exhibited positive signs on the diplomatic front as well. But again, this is something that is an ongoing conversation built on the relationship that the president established with President Xi. And I think that, as the president has noted before, I mean, we'll have to see. But it is encouraging the signs that China is showing.
And the president suggested there was a quid pro quo in terms of not declaring China a currency manipulator because they were helping or going to help with North Korea. So if China does not adequately put pressure on North Korea, is he going to go back and declare them a currency manipulator?
Yeah, so there's a couple things on that. Number one, they haven't been manipulating their currency since he's been in office. That's a fact. Number two is I think the president's tweet said clearly to do so at this time would not be prudent. It's not a quid pro quo. It's just saying that in the middle of them taking very positive signs to help us address the issue, the situation in North Korea, that to label them a currency manipulator I don't think would be very productive in achieving a very, very important national strategic objective.